My new microphones, the last one that we recorded on, the files were, what's the computer word for when they're fucked?
Corrupted?
Yeah.
Welcome to Screens of the Stone Age, the podcast where scientists review movies about prehistoric people. My name is Josh Lindell. I'm a grad student studying Neanderthal teeth, and I'm here with...
I'm Dr. Kimberly Plomp. I am a bioarchaeologist. I study the human skeleton, health and disease, and evolution.
I'm Dr. Ross Barnett, a paleogeneticist specializing in Pleistocene mammals.
And today we're reviewing Beasts of the Southern Wild from 2012. This is quite a bit different than a lot of the movies we've reviewed.
Because it's good.
Yeah, it's a good movie.
Because it's good, yeah. But also, it's Stone Age in one very specific point and otherwise not at all. So I think we're going to probably try and talk as long as we can about Aurochs and not have that much else science to talk about.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ross is going to have a lot to say on that.
Well, I hope so.
But it's a child's imagination, right? So,
or is it? So we do an overview? I'm happy to.
Yeah, who wants to summarize this one?
Yeah, I'm happy to give it a go. So it's set in, I think, the not too distant future, and the main characters are Wick and Hushpuppy. Hushpuppy's a little girl, and Wick's her dad, and they live in the bathtub, which seems to be a kind of bayou swampland of Louisiana, kind of located in the Gulf of New Orleans, that's been flooded by ice cap melting due to global warming in the near future. And so they live there very rurally, as many people do in the kind of bayou of Louisiana and Alabama and places like that. And it doesn't look that different from, the lives of many people today. So they kind of just grow their own food, catch their own fish, and just try and make the best of what they can. They kind of travel around by boats, and we kind of get that Hushpuppy is the main focus of the film. She is kind of growing up. She lives in a very strange time and is trying to make sense of what's going on in the world. She goes to school by boat, where the teacher tells her about the Aurochs. So she has a tattoo on her leg of some kind of cave paintings that look like Lascaux or Chauvet, which has pictures of the Aurochs. But the Aurochs in this film are not like the Aurochs in real life. So the Aurochs in this film are kind of giant, what would be the correct word, suids. So they're giant pigs with extra horns and extra teeth, rather than the kind of cows, which is what the real Aurochs are. But it's a very ambiguous film. It sort of says a lot and says nothing at the same time. It's one of those kind of almost magical realism films, I guess, where you're unsure whether what's happening is entirely real or whether it's just the interpretation of the event through the kind of lens of Hushpuppy's kind of growing mind. So we're kind of told about the Ice Age, which it's the very endearing way that Hushpuppy talks about it. The Ice Age was the last time that the Aurochs were around, and now the ice is melting and they're coming back. And most of the film focuses on the relationship between Wick and Hushpuppy, so this father-daughter kind of relationship. The dad appears to be very kind of troubled. He has some kind of illness which is never really described. Some kind of leukemia, I think, is the best guess we get. But it also seems like he may have other issues too. He goes missing occasionally. One of the sort of early stages that he goes missing, and Hushpuppy's kind of set to survive on her own in the bathtub. She kind of has to survive for herself, so she makes food for herself out of kind of cat food and oil, and puts it to cook. Accidentally burns down her house, which is not great, and hides. When everything's on fire, she just hides in a little box and draws. She spends a lot of time drawing kind of pseudo Paleolithic art on things with charcoal, which is very sweet. And she describes her drawings as for the scientists in the future, so that they can know about Hushpuppy and about her life, which is quite lovely. Anyway, so while this is all kind of going down and her house is burning down, her dad reappears and they have a fight, and she kind of pushes him in the chest, and he kind of collapses. And so we don't really know, what's going on. But they they have a kind of very realistic kind of father-daughter fight where she pushes him over and then says, "If you die, I'm going to go and eat birthday cake all by myself," which is exactly something that my daughter would have said to me at that kind of age. But while Wick is kind of lying on the ground, Hushpuppy runs to Mrs. Bathsheba, who's the teacher with the Aurochs tattoo, and gets some medicine, which appears to be just a very basic kind of bits of tree and root in a bottle, to take it back to her dad. But when she gets back, her dad's not there, and there's a storm coming, and people are fleeing, and it's all kind of chaotic. But she kind of gathers herself together and decides to sort of find some help. And then she goes down to see her neighbors and finds her dad, and they have a kind of reconciliation after the fight, and it's kind of glossed over. And while everyone in the bathtub is fleeing, Wick and Hushpuppy and a few of their neighbors, Walrus and Joe, say that they're going to stay and ride out the storm. They've had other storms before, but this is a huge storm. It kind of floods the bathtub. Hushpuppy and Wick kind of hide in Wick's house, which is separate from Hushpuppy's house, and try and ride it out. Hushpuppy's scared; she can't really sleep. Wick goes out and shoots a shotgun at the storm to show that he's not scared of it, which is a very, I guess, southern way of dealing with it. But they survive it, and they kind of get up the next day and see that all of the bathtub is flooded. So the whole area is under, about a dozen feet of water, really. And they just have to get on with stuff. There's a few people that are left. The neighbors have made it through as well, drunk, it seems. Wick teaches Hushpuppy how to do fishing. So he teaches her from the back of their boat in the flooded bathtub how to kind of tickle a fish and just grab it with your bare hands. We see that the dad, when he's going to sleep, has discolored veins, which is obviously not a very good sign. It looks like some kind of systemic infection is going on, or possibly leukemia that's affecting his blood. And they're kind of in real trouble, because now that all of the bathtub is covered in water, nothing's going to grow. They're not going to be able to grow any crops. Even the kind of fish are going to start dying. If the water recedes, then the land is going to be knackered, because it's been sitting in salt water for ages. So that's going to destroy the land as well. So some kind of secret plan is hatched, and Wink and a couple of the neighbors head off to the levee, which seems to be like a future proofing of the mainlands of Louisiana. They built a huge levee to keep the water out, much like they've done in the past to keep the water out. They've just built it bigger. And these guys go and decide that the best thing they can do is to blow up the levee so that the water kind of floods into Louisiana and decreases in the bathtub, which seems like not a fantastic idea for everyone. Anyway, that kind of goes a bit wrong, but in the end they do blow a hole in it and the water starts to subside. But now they've brought attention on themselves. So until now they've been kind of living in the bathtub, outside the law, outside the rules of the kind of future society. But now that they've blown a hole in the levee and let the water drain into the mainland, they're kind of marked now. And so they have helicopters and officials that come out to the bathtub and essentially kind of forcibly relocate them. So they end up in a processing center, which I guess, it's quite, let me struggle for the word here, prescient. It was quite prescient for 2012. You see these kind of relocation centers, which look like real things from the news that we've seen during kind of Trump's era with, the housing of refugees and people that have crossed the border, and sort of separation of parents from their children and things like that. I mean, that was long in the future in 2012, but is now part of our past. Anyway, Wick and Hushpuppy end up in the processing center, and they get separated. And it looks like, as well as being separated, Hushpuppy is kind of forcibly re-educated. Essentially, she's kind of put in a nursery and given new clothes and a new hairstyle, and forced to kind of interact with other kids, while Wick is kind of taken away and treated for his illness. We see him occasionally in a wheelchair. He looks worse than he did before. But things sort of turn around when they decide to bust out. So Wick and Hushpuppy and the rest of the folk from the bathtub, like Walrus and Little Joe, they decide to leave the processing center, and they kind of escape essentially and try and get onto a bus. But Wick knows that he's not going to go with them, so he kind of pushes Hushpuppy onto the bus and runs off. And Hushpuppy comes back and tries to speak to him, but he doesn't want her to be around while he knows that he's dying. But again, things change. So Walrus, the neighbor, takes Wick back to the bathtub. The kids randomly, I think I might have missed something here, but the kids end up swimming in the sea out to a tugboat that they notice, which has a kind of Captain Birdseye style sailor on it, who's just on his way to what appears to be a floating brothel. And the kids kind of get taken on by this strange place called the Elysian Fields, and they meet a whole bunch of different women of unknown vocation, I guess, and including one which Hushpuppy seems drawn to, who is a woman that fries gator meat in a very similar way to how she was described, how her mother was described by her father earlier in the film. So we get the sense that this woman could be Hushpuppy's mother that she meets at the Elysian Fields. And they have a few bonding moments, although it's left very ambiguous as to whether this is her mother or not. Then we see that the Aurochs, which have been kind of a motif throughout the film, they've kind of been getting closer and closer. They've kind of defrosted from the ice and have been traveling overland, these huge pig peccary-like creatures. But the kids manage to get away from the floating brothel and get back to the bathtub. They see that Wick is dying, and they're getting chased by the Aurochs as well. But then Hushpuppy faces the Aurochs and kind of basically either, I mean, again, ambiguous. We don't know whether this is real or whether this is just a metaphor for her facing her kind of demons and growing up. She kind of stares down the Aurochs and tells them that things are okay, and they kind of wander off and leave her alone. And at the end, we see Hushpuppy kind of reunites with Wick. He's on his deathbed. She still has some of the fried gator from the Elysian Fields, which she's brought back with her. And she feeds this to him very tenderly while she listens to his chest. And you hear his heartbeat sort of slowly stopping, and then it stops. And that's essentially the end of the film. So it's kind of, yeah, it's a good film. It absolutely absolutely hinges on the performance of Hushpuppy, who's played by Kavasne Wallace, who is amazing and was Oscar nominated, I think, for her role here. But yeah, it's about not much actually happens that makes a lot of sense, but it's still a very good film, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to do a story like that completely told through the eyes of a child, right? I think they did a really good job.
Yeah.
And hard for us to criticize using our usual method because we always start off by nitpicking the factual details, but like you said, there's no facts in this. It's it's like what do you call it? Magical realism. It's all happening mostly happening in the mind of a child, and we're trying to figure out what's really happening based on what we're seeing from her perspective.
Yeah. But we can definitely criticize the Aurochs, though, I feel.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's the Stone Age part. That's what we've got. So might as well talk for 45 minutes about Aurochs.
Yeah. So, as I said before, in the film, they're kind of like enormous, like house-sized pigs, with horns on their foreheads and kind of extra horns on their cheeks. And so, of course, the problem with that is that that's not aurochs. Aurochs are bovids, not pigs. Pigs don't have horns; they have tusks. And as far as I know, no suids have ever had horns, which are what aurochs have and cows have, and some other bovids and ovids and caprids have. and they're just super huge. I mean, I don't really understand why they decided to make Aurochs. Why call them Aurochs if they're not Aurochs? I mean,
yeah, they could have just been the beasts or something. Like it could have been a mythical creature. Or
they could have just used cows, because clearly in this they just had pigs and stuck some extra horns on them. Could they have not just done that with like some bulls and just they wouldn't even have to do anything, just make them look bigger with the green screen, and they would, as long as they had horns, they would still have been pretty terrifying, I think.
Well, I can tell you why they did this, because pigs were easier to train. That's the main reason. Also because it's fantastical. A cow is not a monster, right? Like everyone's familiar with cows. So if they just
pigs
had cows that were big, but they weren't just pigs, right? They're pigs wearing costumes, which are. They also were. They really wanted to use real animals and not like computer generated effects. And like I think they made the right choice. It all works really well. The pigs, even though they're like little pet pot-bellied pigs, they're like tiny. You can really tell in the last scene when you get close-ups on their faces, and they're like as big as a house, but their faces are still like cute and neotenous, right? But I think the pig costumes are great. They sort of like look like buffaloes, like or bison, like got like a big furry sort of hump costume that they're wearing. And that's anyway, that's why they used the pigs, because they were easier to train and they wanted to use a real animal. And also, I watched a bit of a short documentary talking about why they used the pigs, and they sort of like this sort of meta symbolism of at the end it's two sort of babies facing off against each other, even though in the movie it's not supposed to be a baby, it's supposed to be an adult animal.
Interesting. So what I'm taking from this is that you can't train a cow. Is that the the upshot?
It's safer to train a small pet pig rather than a large cow.
Fair
I was
enough.
just rereading your chapter in your book, Ross, about aurochs, and you talk about how people don't respect large herbivores, and that cows are one of the most deadly animals in our society today.
100%, yeah. I mean, yeah, they cows. It's just a very human thing of thinking, I'll be fine. It's just a cow, but you forget that they're 500-600 kilos of, as we've discovered, untrainable, very dim mammal. And so, if you get in the way of them and their calves, or if you just get in the way when they're trying to do something, then they will have kind of no hesitation about, just knocking you down and trampling you. And it's the same everywhere. We see the kind of stories of people getting out of their cars in Yellowstone to go and pet the bison, or hug the moose or whatever. And it does feel it's very difficult to garner much sympathy for people that get kind of gored to death by bison or moose or elk or whatever when they're trying to take a photo, just because they think, it's just a herbivore. But they've got antlers, or they've got horns, or they've got a bad attitude. Just sort of stay out of the way. I think it's the Disneyfication of the natural world doesn't really do either humans or the natural world a lot of favors.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
I grew up on a farm with cattle, and cattle are the most peaceful animals, like the absolute vast majority of the time. You can walk in amongst them and they don't even care if they know you, right? Because they're familiar with us. But if you were strangers, they might be a little bit worried about it. But I saw my dad get attacked one time by a cow, and if they have a reason to get upset, they're terrifying. You forget how huge they are when they're just standing around chewing hay.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if cows have been bred for 12,000 years to be peaceful, and they still kill a lot of folk. If cows had the attitude of like goats, then they'd be pretty much unreadable. I mean, goats are just 50 pounds of anger in a woolen outfit with horns.
Aw, the goats here are so sweet. Hank loves to play.
Well, they must like you, because every time I've been around goats, they just they want to knock me down, essentially.
Well, I mean, Hank was born the first week I got here, so he's
Okay.
me since
He's still maybe a little bit of a baby. But yeah, I mean, I think, as I say in the book, that it's the herbivores you got to watch out for. Carnivores, sure, they'll eat you, but they'll do it deliberately, and it won't be an accident. And they'll, most of the time, if they're not hungry, they'll just leave you alone. Like, people live quite happily alongside leopards and lions, really quite close to them in India and in Africa, and they'll generally leave you alone unless you're vulnerable and they're hungry. But there's however many billion cows on the planet, and it's just a numbers game. Like, it only takes 1 in 1,000 to have a bad day, and you're talking about several million angry cows spread out over the planet. So yeah, I mean, people just get very, very stupid around herbivores, and it's just because of our lack of exposure to real nature. I mean, people that live beside hippos don't think of them like we do, because they're angry and they're deadly and they're killers.
Yeah,
they're not like they're not ballet dancing like in Fantasia or eating marbles or whatever, because we just have really kind of we've been led down a kind of garden path of false ideas about these large dangerous animals.
Yeah, when you're in Africa and you're like at a campsite or something, or even like a resort site where you have your own little cabin and everything. I remember I was there, and I wasn't allowed to leave my cabin at night by myself. I had to phone and ask for a guide, and they would come and get me and take me to the restaurant or whatever. And your first thought is lions or something, but it was the hippopotamus. That's what they were worried about, right?
Yeah.
If you ran into a hippo, if you got in the way of a hippo between the hippo and where it wanted to be, you're dead.
And that's it. People think, you need to be scared of lions or leopards or alligators, but no, it's hippos, elephants, rhinos. Those are the guys that are going to mess you up and squish you so that you have to get sent home in an envelope.
I think so. If you look at the teacher who's the one that made Hushpuppy afraid of them, right? And so she's talking about how they used to eat cavemen, and she makes them sound really scary. And she shows this really awesome tattoo on her thigh of 2 aurochs and 3 people. And it's kind of cool because if you look at the one person lying down that's about to get stomped, it's a woman, because there's tiny little breasts there.
Oh, right. Interesting.
Yeah. It's a beautiful tattoo, but they don't look like pigs. They look like cows there.
Right. I mean, I wonder if it's based on some of the real images. So Last Guy's got lots of aurochs, and it has what looks like a dead dude that's just been flattened by an aurochs in one of the images, one of the rare Paleolithic human images. Yeah,
I'd say it's probably based on that, but it doesn't look exactly the same. But
she was a good character, Miss Bathsheba. She was pretty cool.
So, I guess it is a case of the child seeing something and then making it up herself, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of ambiguity in the film, which I think does strengthen it a bit. I mean, it keeps you thinking about it. And we could talk a bit about the actual aurochs, which are the real thing. Is basically the wild ancestor of the cow, in the same way that the wild boar is the ancestor of the domestic pig, or the wolf's the ancestor of the domestic dog. So they were, like we just been discussing, herbivores, but quite angry and powerful, and quite wide-ranging as well. So all over Europe and the Middle East they were found, and they were kind of around until the last wild one died 1627. But they still survive. We have cows, so we have aurochs. Essentially, we just have the domestic form of them. And there's been various attempts to kind of breed them back in the same way that you can produce a wolf from crossbreeding different dog breeds. Essentially, you can sort of do the same with aurochs, which has been done for various insalubrious reasons, I guess. The Nazis were quite keen on breeding back an aurochs for their twisted reasons. But yeah, it looks like they were domesticated not just once, but a couple of times in the Middle East and a few other places. And that's why we have two very different types of domestic cattle today. We have the kind of humped, the zebu type of cattle, and we have the other kind, the less humped, the kind of Western type of cattle from two domestication events. And there's been lots of work done, particularly in my field of ancient DNA, looking at the genetics of aurochs and how they relate to cows and what kind of input aurochs had into the domestic process at different points. Did people breed their early cattle with wild aurochs to kind of improve the stock? Where were they domesticated? Things like that. So it's a really kind of interesting and active area of research at the moment, and they found out some pretty cool things.
Very cool.
So like that early 20th century attempt to breed back something like an aurochs, that resulted in the heck cattle, is that right?
Yeah, which are still around as a breed today and have been used for kind of rewilding. So in places like in the Netherlands, where they're quite keen on rewilding, they've used heck cattle and conic ponies as the equivalents of aurochs and wild horses to help manage the open spaces that they have there. And what's quite good about heck is that they're pretty wild. They can be left on their own. They don't have to be looked after in the way that cattle have to. They're happy to forage on their own and modify the environment as their wild ancestors would have, more or less, we think. But they are quite cranky, so they don't really interact well with people, which is, I guess, what you want for a rewilding project for the most part.
Yeah. Otherwise, they'd be coming up into your yard, and
yeah,
then it's just stray cows.
Yeah,
right?
Stray cows. Yeah, that would be a big problem.
Yeah.
Growing up on a farm, that's not like that unusual. Like the cows just get out all the time, but like I don't know if people like imagine the cows get out and they're like, I'm free, and then they run away. Like if they get out, it's because there's something just on the other side of the fence that they want, right?
Yeah.
And then they just stick around.
Yeah.
So like it was pretty regular. Like our yard was surrounded in trees. It was kind of like a little enclave in the bush, right? It's not unusual to wake up and look out the window and be like, yard's full of cows, and then you gotta get out and chase the cows, find the hole in the fence, chase them back through the hole in the fence.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of stuff in this movie that we could talk about other than the aurochs. There's like you said, she talks about how she's doing her like cardboard box cave paintings to record her story for scientists in the future.
Mm-hmm.
And she says the same thing again at the end. Like the final line of the movie is, she says that when I die, the scientists of the future, they're going to find it all. They're going to know once there was a Hushpuppy and she lived with her daddy in the bathtub. Why do you think she's so concerned as a 6-year-old girl about the scientists in the future knowing about her when she's gone?
I mean, it must have something to do with the teacher, right? Saying that everything is going to end.
Yeah, I kind of interpreted it a little bit as well about her kind of not knowing anything about her own mother. So I think she feels the loss and the kind of absence of information quite keenly from her own kind of personal experience. But yeah, and also the teacher is quite big on science, which is nice as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the teacher's really interesting because she was interested in science, but also like in a very different way than most science teachers that I've known, you know? So she's got this tattoo of the aurochs. She's teaching 6-year-olds about paleontology somehow, but, you know, telling that to them as like a narrative about how the aurochs used to eat all the cave babies and the cavemen couldn't do anything about it because they were too weak or something like that. And so like framing the whole thing as like a life lesson about how to be strong and how to adapt to the world around you, which is, I mean, that's why we have the sort of like different themes all tied up here, where like her world is falling apart because of climate change and flooding, and also because her father is dying, and this gets wrapped up with the mythical idea of the Aurochs coming back to life. But like the teacher's also like when her father collapses, I don't know if you said the part where she gets into a fight with him and she punches him and that's enough to knock him out for a bit because of his whatever his blood condition is. So she goes to the teacher and she brings the hospital bracelet that he was wearing. And so she knows what that is. So she knows enough about Western medicine to know exactly what the condition is. But she also whips up a sort of natural remedy, some sort of traditional medicine in a jar, which she sends back with Hushpuppy. So she's got this interesting mix of knowledge of science and Western medicine, but combined with, traditional medicine as well as more of like a framing the science in like a non-science, like non-Western sort of worldview. Like, when we talk about science on this show, it's like facts and stuff like that. Hers is framed in terms of like a narrative and relating to the little kid's life.
Yeah.
I kind of thought that she just had a knowledge of kind of folk medicine. So, almost all Western medicine is based on plants and other things that have an effect. And most of them have come through kind of folk medicine. I guess, in the bathtub, there is no access to a pharmacy, or they're totally self-reliant in terms of, their food, their drink, their medicine. So she seems to be the doctor / pharmacist who's able to rustle up kind of approximate equivalents from what she can find in the bathtub.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but like at the same time, the wrist bracelet must have had like the clinical name of the disease on it, right? Or something that she was able to tell. So, I mean, she's giving him traditional medicine, but she knows enough about Western medicine to know the Western name of the condition and be able to give a traditional remedy for it, right?
Although, he still dies, so...
Well, he never got the medicine. Remember when Hushpuppy got back to where he was gone. So she hid it in a hollow tree.
Yeah, and then he spat it out when he was given it at the evacuation center.
That's because it looked just like dirt. I mean, it was mostly just sort of storm dirt. That's what she was giving him.
I got the impression that maybe the jar had emptied during the flood because it must have survived the flood in that tree stump.
Yeah.
Another reference we have a reference to ancient Greece when they go to the floating brothel, which is called Elysian Fields. And I might be over-interpreting too much, but so Elysian Fields was some sort of Greek afterlife. None of us are classicists. Do you guys know anything about Elysian Fields?
Just what I saw in Gladiator, that it's where you go when you're dead. It's their kind of equivalent of heaven, where you have, I guess, farmland that doesn't need to be, that works without much effort. A very kind of agriculturalist heaven, where the work does itself.
Yeah, I don't know anything about. I was hoping you guys knew more than me. Like you also have the concept of Hades in Greek mythology. So I don't know. It seems like the difference is like Hades is the underworld for like everybody, and then Elysian Fields is like a special paradise afterlife, reserved for heroes and gods. But anyway. Like you said, she and her friends swam out to a light that they could see on the horizon, which I think that was like symbolic of her mother, because she would like throughout the movie look out across the ocean at this light and call to her mother, who her father told her had swam away and she was hoping was going to come back someday. So she swam out to this light looking for her mother, and what they found was, I wasn't sure if the light was from the boat or was it from like a buoy out there and the boat came by and picked them up at the same time. But
I thought it was from the boat, but...
Yeah, so they swim out to the light. They find this guy driving some kind of a barge who symbolically is going to be the ferryman that takes you to the afterlife, and he takes them to Elysian Fields, where she finds... in some form or another, her mother, who she's been waiting to come back all her life. And then at the end of that, she realizes, even though she's happy there and she likes that, she realizes she has to go back to her father. So I interpreted that whole thing as being her like traveling to the afterlife to find her mother, to come to terms with the fact that her mother's not coming back, and then finding the strength to return to her father after that.
Well, it's deep.
Yeah, and the film it's an onion of a film. It's got many layers.
It is, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I like that the bargeman was just really friendly. How crazy would it be to just, like, be out there and then pick up 4 little girls swimming in the middle of nowhere?
Yeah.
He didn't even act like it was a strange thing, though. He was
big
like,
deal.
all right.
Yeah, he picks up randoms in the sea all the time. So I guess he'd be the equivalent then of Charon, the ferryman that takes souls across the Styx.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if there's a different ferryman for Elysian Fields rather than Hades, but I don't know.
Maybe you have to pay him better, and he'll take you there instead.
Yeah. Chicken sandwiches or whatever it was he was eating.
yeah. That was so weird. I just, He had like eaten. Where did he get them? I mean,
I don't know, but he says he eats them all the time, and he leaves the packets on the boat to remind him about who he was when he ate it. And you're like, you mean from 5 minutes ago?
Yeah, all the wrappings are the same. How can you tell?
I know. I'm gonna say that you were just a mucky pup, right?
Yeah, you're a hungry person. That's who you were.
Yeah, yeah.
Maybe that's important. Maybe he can look back on his pile of wrappers and know that he's been the same person the whole time.
Maybe.
He must clean it out, though, because it wasn't that many wrappers for him to have been doing it. Because he said he ate them his whole life, right? So
yeah.
That boat also seemed to be pretty wide open. I feel like they'd have to just blow out into the ocean once in a while.
He's just indirectly littering, right?
Oh, jeez. Have either of you guys been to Louisiana?
No.
I was in New Orleans.
Okay. Did you go out to the bayou at all?
Yeah, we did like a swamp tour, Charlie and I.
Okay. Did you see any gators?
It was really cool.
Or floating brothels?
We didn't see any floating brothels. We didn't really, maybe we saw a couple of wild gators, but they had, it broke my heart. They had this baby gator in a cooler to show us.
Okay.
You're just like, oh God, if I'd known that, I wouldn't have bought tickets to this. But like, they definitely treated it not like an animal, not a sentient thing.
Right.
At one of the, like at the place where you go, the tour center before you get on the boat and go, they have an albino alligator though. It's pretty crazy. Looks like a nightmare.
I think they're quite popular in the skin trade, albino alligators for their skins.
So she's like a tourist attraction. So I hope they wouldn't do that to her. But yeah, but the bayou is gorgeous. Yeah,
it's interesting. I was there in 2004, and yeah, it's not like anywhere else I've ever been. The kind of huge stands of trees in the water, with highways kind of going over the top of it. Stuff. It was pretty crazy. But I did like New Orleans. I thought New Orleans was an interesting city, unlike most of the other cities I've been to in America, in that it had obviously kind of grown up organically, and it wasn't just set out on a grid pattern.
Yeah.
So it felt very European in terms of its kind of architecture and its layout.
And I just love the creepy vibe, just like Edinburgh. And the music scene is amazing. I remember, so I was there for a conference, American Association of Physical Anthropology, now Biological Anthropology, back in the day. And so we, probably about 30 bioarchaeologists, all just through a network, came together to plan a ghost tour for all of us.
Oh,
so
yeah.
I think we had to split up into like 2 or 3 groups, but it was fun. So we all went at the same time for this ghost tour. And the poor tour guide takes us to this street, and she's telling us this ghost story. She's like, so you see all these beautiful new houses. Well, one of them wanted to put a pool in the backyard, and when they dug up to put the pool in, they found skeletons, hundreds of skeletons. And then we all just were like, well, where are they now? Were they excavated? Where are they curated? Like, what do you think it was? And she was like, okay, wrong crowd. I don't know any of these answers. Let's move on.
Oh, jeez. I just see all you guys. Oh, cool! Wow, I wish that would happen to my house.
Yeah.
How many skeletons? That's great.
How many? Yeah. What was the population? Are they open for research access?
Oh dear.
Well, I didn't actually take any notes for this movie because we've basically got the Aurochs, and I knew Ross would have something to say about that, but I don't know. Are we at the end of what we can say about this one in terms of what our podcast does?
I think so, pretty much.
I think so.
It was
It
quite
was
nice
a good movie. It's worth watching.
Yeah, and it was quite nice to see the kind of factual approach they took to climate change and the real effects that it's likely to have if uncurbed. So yeah, the whole of that kind of Gulf area of Louisiana, Alabama, Mississippi, Texas, and Florida are not going to have a good time if water levels rise significantly because they're so low lying. And you sort of see that with the even within our kind of lifetime, the increase in kind of serious weather events that have happened, and kind of post Katrina, the sort of history of New Orleans. Yeah, it's bad times. So.
Here's one technical thing that confused me a bit. The whole physics of this, like blowing up the levee to clear their flooding. The levee is separating them from the mainland, and so like they're on the ocean side of the wall, so they blew up the wall and like drained the ocean into the continent, and that was enough to drain their island. I wasn't quite clear on how that worked. Do you have any better insights?
Nope.
No.
Yeah, I had no idea. How do levees work? What happens when the levee breaks? As Led Zeppelin asked.
or Dylan.
Yeah, we need to get Jimmy Page on the phone, find out what happens.
That would be amazing.
Okay. Well, I'll reach out for the next episode. For our next music videos episode, we'll see what we can do. Well, do we have final thoughts about Beasts of the Southern Wild?
It was a movie that I would have watched even without this. I had never heard of it before, so it would have been like probably watching it at my parents' or something when it was just on. So yeah, it was nice. It was actually just like watching a movie, not like work.
Yeah, you've redeemed yourself, I think, Josh, this week with a good film, and it's interesting because it's not like many films today. It wasn't a sequel. It's not superhero or comic book based. It's its own story, well told and self-contained, which was really nice. We're not going to get
with really
a sequel, and we don't want a sequel.
Really fantastic actors and and beautiful imagery.
Yeah, I wish we were like a literary podcast or like a real film criticism podcast so that we could dig into the actual filmmaking or the actual story a little bit deeper.
Rather than just, it was good.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. But it should look more like a cow.
Yeah, that's our, on the taglines on the film poster, you've got all these Siskel and Everts, and then you've got us saying, needs more cow.
Needs more cow.
Needs more cowbell. If you've been enjoying Screens of the Stone Age, get in touch with us. Follow us on Twitter at SOTSA_podcast and on Facebook at SOTSA podcast, or send us an email to screensofthestoneage@gmail.com. Screens of the Stone Age is supported by the Paleoanthropological Society of Canada. Find out more at pasc-scpa.ca.